So I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining. I'm Carole Gaskell from Full Potential Group. And what we're going to focus on today, for this webinar organised by Optimise, is how do you harness a remote team? I'm sorry? Actually, if people have got their, I think most people are on mute, but if you're not on mute, would you mind putting yourself on mute? I'm very happy to answer questions at the end. And equally, if you'd like to put anything in the text box, then please feel free and I'll see if I can answer those as we go along as well. So hello and welcome to this session on harnessing a remote team. And what I'd like to cover in the 30 minutes that we've got together is 4 key elements. So looking at how do you create connection with people, and bearing in mind some of you will know your remote team members better than others, and different people on your team will have different types of preferences. So we'll look a little bit at creating connection. And then I'm going to focus very much on the why, how and what of your team. So to harness a remote team and get everybody working in synergy, part of it is having a connected why and understanding your purpose and motivation. So I'm going to do a quick session on looking at that. Some of you may well already have a really clear team purpose. And so part of this is just to help you think about reinvigorating that or looking at what's actually driving your team members right now. And then I'm going to focus on the how and how can you really work well together? What are you doing brilliantly right now? Anything you could do to step it up a level, change anything people could stop doing? And at the very end, I'm going to do a tiny bit on how do you harness some key team priorities to move yourself forward and hopefully help as we emerge through this current situation. And I'm going to start with a really old quote. This is from Katzenbach and Smith in 1993. And their book, and there's been lots of other work around the wisdom of teams. They say a high-performing team is a small number of people with complementary skills. So the first thing I want you to think about is, of the remote team, and some of you might be members of several rather than just one, what are your skills? What do you bring to the team? What are your skills and talent? And what are the complementary skills of your team members? It's a small number of people with complementary skills, but they're committed to a common purpose. I'm going to touch on that a little bit further along. So a common purpose, common performance goals, and a shared approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Now, this mutual accountability can be challenging in a team that sees each other all the time, but it can actually step up a level of challenge when we're working remotely. So I'm going to look a little bit about how do you hold each other accountable and how do you do that in a way that suits all your team members when potentially quite a lot of you might be working from home. But what sets a high-performing team apart is how deeply members are committed, particularly to one another. So I think this is an opportunity right now to create a deeper level of connection with each other. And so really looking at how do we do that and optimize remote team performance. Now, exceptional performance at this time for some businesses and some teams is actually easy because their businesses are flourishing and the services they're providing are needed even more than ever. And so the opportunity to outperform expectations for the team just means that the team has to prioritize because there's so much going on. Some of you might be part of those types of teams, but others of you, exceptional performance right now might be having to think outside the box, having to recreate what your team stands for, what you're delivering, what you're contributing, and how you're going to re-emerge, hopefully, into this new normal, whatever that's going to be, and it's evolving as we speak. So it's thinking about what does exceptional performance mean for you and your team. But one of the fundamental things about any team performing brilliantly is high levels of enthusiasm and energy. And it's easy for me to say, but this is something that genuinely, if we know our motivators and know the motivators of our team members, you can actually boost each other up and keep each other operating at higher levels of motivation. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And having this personal commitment, willing to go the extra mile with each other. And stories and galvanizing events about overcoming the odds will often pull a team together. Now, none of us could have asked for the current situation or even predicted the current situation, but this is probably the biggest galvanizing event potentially that any of us will have in our lives, and certainly in the teams that we're in. So the stories of how everyone pulls together, how we do overcome the odds when we're going through this current situation, could be a make or break for many teams. And my intention in this webinar is to help you see how this can actually give you a break, how you can use this to pull together strongly. And the other thing about high-performing teams is they have more fun and humour than ordinary teams. Now, I don't know about you, but certainly our team have been sharing jokes on WhatsApp and doing all sorts of different activities to keep our spirits up. But I was working with a team just recently who were talking about, they did a remote bake-off with each other, Friday night drinks. There's lots of different things depending on the type of team you are, to think about how can you inject some of that fun and that humour into humanness, especially when we're, you know, up against it, as many of us are. But one of the big differentiating factors in a high-performing team is they're committed to something larger than themselves, something that can't be denied. It's a compelling purpose or a passion to fulfill it. And it's an opportunity to think right now, what is it that you're committed to in this team? What's bigger than you as a person? What is that collective why that you're all standing for? Because once you've got that, the connection and the belonging and all these different aspects of how you build trust and transparency will definitely support your team. So I think someone's got a little bit of background noise. If you can just check whether you're on mute, that would be great, thanks. So connection and belonging is the first theme I want you to think about. You know, how much trust and transparency is there in your team? Are you having regular check-ins? I know for some of us, it's first thing in the morning, might feel like once every day feels too much, but depending on the projects you're on, you might be connecting on a regular basis. And it's how do you do it? You know, are you visibly seeing people? Is it more check-ins on the phone? But it's thinking, what are the types of check-ins you need with your team? And how many are collective group ones and how many are one-to-ones? Don't underestimate sometimes the power of one-to-ones with your different team colleagues. Having empathy and being even more human is critical now. And so finding ways of reaching out with a more feelings approach than some of you might be comfortable with, but taking the time to listen to each other, taking time to ask questions that maybe you wouldn't do before, will build a stronger empathy. Defining purpose we've touched on, and inclusivity and involving people and knowing what people are brilliant at is all key to you building higher connection, but also visualizing the good times ahead. Now, some people are already having good times, but for others of us, it's thinking about how do we emerge from this stronger? How can we use this opportunity and together co-create what the future is going to look like? And this word trust is fundamental to team working. And it's probably even more important when we're working remotely, because how much do you trust? Do your team members have integrity, sincerity, reliability, all the things that you see here? Because trust is to believe that someone is good and honest, that they're going to be there for you, and that they're going to have your back, that they're safe and reliable. Now, I'd like you to think for a minute, who on your team do you trust the most and why? And be honest with yourself. Who on your current team do you maybe trust the least? I mean, it might be you don't know them so well. There might be a newer member of the team, or there might be a quieter member. But what can you do to close the trust gaps? The thing about trust, the more you increase intimacy, and that's into me, you see, so you allow people to see into yourself, the more you increase intimacy, the more you open up the opportunity for trust. And equally, the more you reduce a self-orientation and a focus on yourself, the greater the trust. Some of you might have seen the work on trust equation, but if you're interested in trust, that might be something that you want to have a look at. And that whole thing about trust, you know, when it comes to teamwork, are you all in the same boat or aren't you? Do you genuinely have each other's backs? You know, sure glad the hole isn't at my end. Is that your team, or is your team robust and looking out for each other? You know, how safe do you feel on your team, and how safe are you creating it if you're the team leader? And I think the thing is, with trust, it sort of goes beyond that into psychological safety, which is really important when we're remote, is thinking beyond normal levels of trust into that interpersonal trust and mutual respect, you know, where you're comfortable being your full self no matter what, and where your colleagues are really comfortable being their full selves. So something to leave you with just on this segment is, what are the 2 things required for you to feel more connected to your current team? How could you feel safe, be more open and more honest? Is there any one person that you could reach out to in a slightly different way than you currently have to build a greater sense of trust and cohesion? And if you're the team leader, what are the things that you can do to engender a greater level of trust and connection? So I'm now going to move on to knowing your purpose and your motivation. Because once you've got that bedrock of trust and that connection with each other, it's having an aligned goal that you're all heading to. You know, as Simon Sinek says, it's heading for that why. Again, a great TED talk, Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle, and the power of why, and understanding why do you exist. And I think right now, really clarifying your why and knowing your team purpose and knowing your individual purpose and how that aligns is really important. So thinking about, and you might want to either revisit your purpose or relook at it, but what is it that we're here to do? And how individually do we make up the parts that are going to deliver that? But also, how energized and motivated is the team? And this is a big one that we're being asked a lot about at the moment, is how do you keep everybody motivated? How do you keep yourself motivated, but other people? Ultimately, motivation is energy. And it comes from the Anglo-Norman term motive, which means drive. And so what we're talking about here is what gives you that energy, that drive to keep going. Our motivations are actually our inner drivers, and it's our inner drivers that determine how we feel, how we act, what we do. Now, ideally, you'd want everyone on your team to be massively motivated. In reality, you may well have a mix of motivation and a mix of drivers on your team. We actually do a process called motivational mapping at Full Potential Group. And if anyone wants to get a bit more info on it, the website is fullpotentialgroup.com, where you can actually map your level of motivation and what is driving you right now. Now, it'll also tell you you are X% motivated. Now, in an ideal world, especially as we're going through all this change, being over 80% motivated is your ideal scenario. We would say you're in the optimal zone for motivation. And ideally, you'd want your team members to be in there. In reality right now, and I've been profiling lots of teams' motivation recently, a lot of teams are in the boost zone. So 60 to 80% motivated, still fairly motivated, but they need a few boosts to keep them revved up. But in reality, especially with all the change and remote working and furloughing, there are many, many people and teams who are in the risk zone where there's a risk to their energy, or they're in the action zone where they really need to take some action because their energy is really low. Their motivation is really low. So if you're honest with yourself at the moment, just think, how motivated do you feel? And how motivated do you think your team is? You know, do you need a complete change? And is this the opportunity for change? Are you a bit demotivated and could do something about it? Or is it just more tweaking? Or is it highly motivated and sustaining it? There are 9 key motivators that get us out of bed in the morning. If you read Dan Pink and Drive, he says there are 3. I actually believe there are 9. His 3 are in here. But most people have a mix of motivators. And the key to think about is which are the 1 or 2 that are most important to you? Which ones are driving you right now? Now, on many teams, we have people that are motivated by the defender. They're looking for safety, security, and predictability, and they're being really rocked right now. And their motivation level's low because it's hard to get that security. You might have people on your team who have high friends, say they want belonging, friendship, fulfilling relationships, and they might be finding that hard if they're working remotely. So you need to do a few extra things to keep them boosted. The stars like recognition, and so being recognized for what you're doing and getting that virtual recognition is going to be important. Some of you on this session might have the director motivator, where you like to have some power and influence and some control. And it's thinking, what have you got control over? And what is it that you can drive forward? The builder is the most commercial of all the motivators. Says here, seeks money, material, satisfaction, and above average standard of living. It's also the motivator that is focused often on either making money or saving costs and looking at what the return on investment is around what you're doing as a team. So if that's your motivator, it's thinking about, how do you reduce costs, but how can you get some revenue? And the builder is very competitive, so it's set yourself goals and targets. Some of you listening to this are likely to have high expert motivator, or as Dan Pink talks about, mastery. The expert is driven and gets motivation by knowledge, by learning more, becoming a master in what they do, specializing. Now, right now, this might be the opportunity for you to deepen your expertise, to become even more of a master, because it is an opportunity to learn, and maybe that's why you're on the webinar. Other people have creator motivators, so they love innovating, and brilliant if you've got someone with creator motivator in your team right now, because they might help the team think outside the box and start helping you reimagine the future as we emerge from this current situation. Some of you might have spirit and want that freedom and independence and autonomy. And actually you might be thriving right now, working from home, not having to go into an office, and having a greater sense of independence than you might otherwise have. And I suspect quite a lot of you on this session might have high searcher. If you have high searcher motivator, then meaning, making a difference, adding value, doing things that feel purposeful, providing worthwhile things, wanting to contribute will be key for you. Now, the key thing here is be honest, which is your top motivator, and do you have one of these that's lowest? I would usually get people to rank these, or in the assessment, it ranks them and it actually scores them for you. But do more of the things that motivate you. Think about your team. How do your motivators complement each other? And how do you ramp up the things that give you energy, and how do you limit spending too much time on the things that drain your energy? I thought I'd share our team profile, so I'll put this into practice a little bit and you can see. Because you can do a profile that actually looks at your motivators and gives you strategies on how you keep them boosted, especially as we're in change. But you can put a whole team together and look at what the team's got in common. Now, it might not surprise you, as Full Potential Group, we do a lot of coaching, leadership development work. So our top motivator is that searcher. So we're incredibly purposeful. And right now, what's firing us up is how we can activate more potential in 1 million people this year, which is our target. So putting our purposefulness to good use is what's keeping us energized. We have the expert motivator. So we like to be masters of what we do, insightful, bring insight to other people, but constantly learning, constantly wanting to bring new learning to make us more purposeful. So again, that's driving us right now. But the watch out for us as a senior team is, if anyone remembers what the bird is, it's the spirit motivator. We all like freedom and independence. So at the moment, working in isolation and working in our own homes is suiting our independence. But the challenge for us as a team is not to get into our silos. And probably part of the reason I'm running this session is I'm constantly reminding myself the importance of galvanizing the team together, because it's recognizing how people can be autonomous and independent, but it's also looking at the connections and the interdependence between us. So I hope this has given you a little bit of an idea of thinking about what might motivate you and what might drive you. And when you know your motivators, it becomes easier to link in with what's your personal purpose and how does that fit with your team purpose. That will be a whole separate webinar. And what is your team why? You might be really clear on that right now, or you might need to think about refreshing it. And be honest, is everyone aligned behind that? Japanese, for finding your purpose, if anyone's interested, there's a great book, Ikigai, which means what you live for, and it actually takes you through steps to find your purpose. So a little bit of a resource if anyone wants to do some learning, if there's some expert motivators out there. So the next thing I want to look at is how you work together. And obviously a massive topic. But what I would like to do is pose some questions, and there will be a handout that can be emailed to you after this webinar if you want to remember and not have to write all this down. But if you're a team leader right now, what do you need to know about your team that can help you really support them in this period? How can you adapt your leadership style to harness the power of this remote team? What do you really expect from the team? And are you being clear about your expectations? And is there an honest flow of communication? And how can you create the best climate for your team to thrive? So thinking about some of those key elements if you're leading the team. But if you're a team member, what do you want to know from your leader at this time? You know, now's the time to be honest and courageous. So ask the questions that maybe before you wouldn't ask. Sometimes working remotely, sending an email may be easier for some people. How do you need to adapt to work more collaboratively? What don't you know but you want to know? And what does your leader need to know about you? You know, to build that trust, to build that transparency, and to be more intimate, to build a greater connection. Are there any things you could share as a team that will glue you together more? And what breakthroughs do you want in the team right now? Now, some of you might be aware of preferences and personalities and behaviors, but I just wanted to get you thinking whether you've done this work or not. Some of you might have done MBTI or Myers-Briggs, or you might have done some of the colours, insights, or STI. There's lots of different profiling tools. But thinking about different members of your team. You know, some people might be introvert and get their energy from inside themselves, so be more quiet and thoughtful. And some people might be more extrovert and want to talk. Now, people who are more introvert could be thriving right now, especially if they're working from home and they're having that opportunity to be more thoughtful and to think things through in a different way. But if you're more introvert preference and you're on group calls or group webinars, please make sure you're not staying too quiet. Conversely, if you're extrovert, you will need to be reaching out, and that connection piece will be really important to you. Just make sure you don't do all the talking in the group sessions, and that you give the opportunity for some of your introverted colleagues to have the opportunity to speak. But make sure you are getting out there and stimulating yourself if you're extrovert preference, because you'll get stimulated externally. So you will be needing to make the fundamental connections with people. If you've done the colours, you'll be more aware of introversion, extraversion as expressed as colours. If you haven't, you might want to have a go with me right now. But if you're extrovert preference, you might be extroverted thinking preference, which we would call fiery red. Again, you can do this profile from our website. Are you determined, demanding, competitive, strong-willed and purposeful? Or are you more sunshine yellow? So still extrovert, but you're more feeling preference. Are you more sociable and dynamic? Do you like doing things together, being persuasive and expressive with people? Or if you're more introvert preference, you might be an introverted feeling person who you're more relaxed and caring and encouraging and sharing, and you're patient with colleagues. You want to do things harmoniously. You don't want to upset people. Just make sure that you don't hold your light under a bushel while you're working remotely and stay too quiet. You could well be the wind beneath your team members' wings. Equally, you might be introvert preference and thinking, which we would call the cool blue. So you like to get things right, logical, organized, analytical, questioning and cautious. Now, again, right now for you, making sure that you set yourself up in a logical way and that you're able to focus and get the analysis and the information you need will be really important. But from a team perspective, if you think that you've got that red extrovert thinking energy, focus is going to be important. So what can you focus on? And you'll be an ideal team member to co-create that shared purpose and get all the team focusing on their results. If you're extrovert, but that's sunshine yellow, some more extrovert feeling, you'll be brilliant at the collaboration piece right now and keeping people connected and being agile, thinking outside the box for the team. If you have that more introverted feeling preference, the green, the earth green, you'll be good at creating the team climate, pulling the team members together and building that trust and cohesion that I mentioned earlier. And if you've got that fantastic cool blue, then what you'll be brilliant at with the team is process, putting really good structures and working methods in and measuring what you're doing. So remember, it's what are you brilliant at? What do you bring to the team? But also, what do your team members bring? And how can you collaborate and use each other's strengths and the value that they bring? We can plot different people on a profile and actually see where different people are and what they bring to a team. But remember right now, If you've got red energy, get the information you need and make sure you stay focused and on subject. If you're yellow, you'll need some stories and some interaction with your colleagues, and you'll be great at focusing on the future and thinking about emerging from the situation. Green energy, you don't want to feel too threatened, but you'll be great at building team security, but make sure you get the reassurance you need about where the team's heading. And if you're cool blue, then you'll be supported by data and statistics. Make sure that you get things in writing from people or emails from people and proof and evidence to keep you going. So it's being aware of what different team members need and how you can make sure that you're utilizing each other's strengths. So creating the trust, knowing your why, having a greater understanding of how you work, and finally, it's agreeing your priorities. Like, what are you delivering as a team? What are your key objectives? Because they might have changed in the current circumstances. And what are the big challenges? If people trust each other enough, you'll share the challenges and make sure that, you know, you can really look at what can stop you delivering against them. I think what I'm seeing a lot right now is busyness versus impact. And as a team, we might be really busy, but what are the things that are going to create the impact, and what can we stop doing to focus on the things that are most important? And what are you agreeing to do as a team? There's lots of different ways of mapping this. So impact and effort is a good one. And looking, I would say, focusing on what are your quick wins that will have a high impact and a high effort, a low effort. And equally, what are the big projects or the big rocks that will have a big impact, but maybe they need a little bit more effort? They are the two boxes to focus on. Say no to the low impact things, the filler tasks and the hard slogs. You've got to say no to those right now, because the quick wins and the big projects are the things that will move you forward. Don't be a busy fool. And when you're prioritizing as a team and holding each other accountable, the big pitfalls when you're remote is role creep, where people get confused on who does what. And we definitely had that in the early stages of all working from home. You definitely need to clarify and ensure understanding of who does what, and be clear on accountabilities and when you're catching up with each other. You might have some team members who are feeling out of sync or feeling out on the outside of what's going on. So understanding their preferences, how they like to work, agreeing what information they need and what their contribution and value to the team is, frequency and format of communication is really key. And this whole thing about being busy but not productive, how do you support each other to do that? You agree what you're focusing on, what your key goals are and your purposes, and then keep checking back all your activities to those priorities and to your purpose. Until one is committed, there's always hesitancy, a chance to draw back, always in effectiveness. With teams right now, commitment is key. The moment we definitely commit, providence moves too. So Goethe said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it, because boldness has genius, power and magic in it. Begin it now. So as a team, how committed are you, and what are the things that you're ready to begin? Because this is a unique opportunity for us, which we won't get again, hopefully. And it's thinking about, how do we move forward? If you want to perform exceptionally, keep your enthusiasm high. Know what your motivators are. Have that personal commitment. Think about your galvanizing events that will pull you together, and that yellow energy people will be able to pull those stories together and thrive on those. But keep the injections of fun and humor, because that's going to keep you going. And remember about your purpose, your personal purpose, but also the team purpose. What are you really committed to? What's the greater good of why you're here? And really look at that compelling purpose, and what's your passion? What are you brilliant at, and how are you going to fulfill that? And just keep the communication going, because the more we work remotely, the more important it is to keep communicating, keep supporting each other. So I hope that's given you some insights, and anyone who's interested, there will be a handout that will back up this. But I'm going to open up now and see if there are any questions just before we close off. So if anyone wants to demute yourself and ask a question, or if you want to put anything in the chat box, please feel free. It always goes very quiet at this point. Equally, if you want to email me and you've got any questions, it's carole@fullpotentialgroup.com. And I'll see if I can help you privately, especially if you're more introvert preference, you might not want to post something to the broad group.
Carole, not a question, just a comment. I think that was really useful. Thank you. I think the way that you've just kind of distilled some of those points down into kind of really rememberable things, I think will be really useful, you know, to individuals and teams actually whilst they are remote. I'm one of those slightly more introverted, high blue individuals. And I think for me, it's remembering, you know, at this point in time, actually we need to remember, because we don't always have face-to-face communication, that we have to be quite careful about our messaging, you know, particularly if I'm dealing with, you know, somebody that's, you know, maybe diametrically opposed given the way that they're maybe motivated. So, you know, that definitely has been something that I've been considering. So thank you, that was really helpful.
Thank you. I can see someone's asked how frequently should a team meet, and it depends what projects you're working on. And I think it's best to co-create with the team how frequently. I mean, certainly with our team, we're meeting once every morning, but that suits us. But it's not always, you know, that might not be right for what you're working on. And for you, it might be every other day, or it might be once a week. And you might have different projects and different teams that need different frequency. So I would say agree amongst you what everybody needs. Thank you very much for the comments in the chat box. I really appreciate it. I hope it has given you some good things to think about. And I wish you well with remote team working. We don't know how long this is going to go on for, but thank you for making the time to join. And I hope I meet you again at some point. So stay well, everybody. And thank you.